Then on Wednesday, the UK Treasury Minister David Gauke announced an end to the VAT relief, which has spawned a steadily growing industry in the bailiwick. We're told up to 600 jobs could be at risk there. And amidst the recriminations, the legality of the move has even been questioned. With those two stories dominating the news agenda all week, I'm pleased to say that the ministers for the relevant departments have agreed at short notice to join us this morning. The Commerce and Employment Minister, Carla McNulty-Bower, and the Environment Minister, Peter Sirrett. Welcome to you both this morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Now, of course, listeners, what we discuss today is up to you, of course, as always, but under the circumstances, I think it's fair to say we'll be giving priority to questions relating to the mandates of these two ministers. As I say, they've agreed to come in at short notice. I'm Simon Delarue, and I hope you'll join me for the next 2 hours for this special Sunday phone-in. I might remind you that there's also been an announcement this week that with certain conditions we can now speak out at open planning meetings, and don't forget the island's long-awaited dairy industry review is due to be debated in just a couple of weeks' time. Other matters that are of direct relevance to our two guests today. But shall we start with the issue of LVCR, as it's known, low-value consignment relief, the VAT loophole, as it has sometimes been called. Now, Deputy McNulty-Bower, when I was growing up, the word fulfilment meant getting the best out of life. It's come to mean something quite different in relation to our economy. Can you just, very quickly, let's define our terms, can you just summarise briefly what exactly the fulfilment industry is?
Well, the fulfilment industry, I suppose, is fulfilling people's orders, best known in relation to Guernsey's fulfilment industry, whereby a person will place an order with a company, most likely to be online. That order will be fulfilled by an organisation, and the product will be picked and prepared and dispatched.
And the reason that this has taken off here in the Channel Islands in particular?
Well, low-value consignment relief was an initiative that was brought in by the UK government back in 1983. It was introduced because the UK discovered that it was costing more to provide a service of delivering, provide a service to consumers than it was to actually I'm getting confused here, but it was 1983. It was introduced by the UK government in order to help the post office get goods through to the UK customers in time. It was primarily brought in relation to flowers, because flowers that were being picked, packed and dispatched from the Channel Islands had a shelf life, and without helping and making a provision to get those goods in through quickly to the UK, then the products would have not been in a good state by the time they arrived with the consumer.
OK, but it's obviously built up from that initial issue of having a tax that's so expensive to collect it's not really worth it, to becoming an industry in its own right. Now, that's led, obviously, to some bitter complaints from certain parties, and that leads me on neatly to our first caller, who is a man who has been fairly successful, I think it's fair to say, in objecting to this entire process. He was very quick off the mark in putting in a request to appear on this programme this morning, a couple of days ago. This is Richard Allen from a group called RAVAS. Good morning to you, Richard.
Morning.
First of all, for those who are unaware, you have obviously played a part in our reaching the position where we are now. Can you briefly summarise what your organisation, RAVAS, stands for, both in terms of the acronym and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, our organisation, Retailers Against VAT Avoidance Schemes, firstly, we're not a tax campaign organisation, in that we're not campaigning for particular kinds of taxes or supporting any kind of, sort of theological debate on taxes. We're purely to stop people avoiding VAT, because we're all obligated in the UK to pay it, and therefore it's very important that we don't end up in an unfair competitive situation because people are essentially able to avoid it.
OK, thank you. Before I allow you to put your question, I imagine it's Deputy McNulty-Bower that you're wanting to address this morning. Can I just ask you if you feel satisfied in what you've been able to achieve thus far with your campaign?
I think we have been able to highlight the reality of this situation, particularly to the European Commission, because it was interesting to hear Deputy McNulty-Bower's comments, because she said a number of things that were completely incorrect then, and the questions that I'd like to ask relate to really her position in this and her knowledge of particularly the European directives that surround this industry, because I would have thought it's important for your listeners to know if somebody's going to encourage an industry which employs lots of people, and obviously we're very sympathetic to people that have been caught up in this, surely the person that is, or one of the people that's encouraging this, should understand the legislation and the implications of encouraging this kind of industry.
Well, Deputy McNulty Bauer, how do you respond to that?
I didn't hear the question.
Mr. Allen there is suggesting that you have encouraged this industry to an inappropriate degree.
Okay, well, no, we haven't encouraged it.
Well, I'd like to ask a specific question.
Yes, fire away. Go ahead. Sorry, Deputy McNulty Bauer, you're able to hear Mr. Allen?
I can,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, fire away.
If Deputy McNulty Bauer was in a position of dealing with this issue with the government, is she fully aware of the actual directives that cover this relief and what they actually say? And specifically, is she aware of the obligation that is placed upon the UK in implementing this relief?
Do I have the EU directives in front of me? No.
Well, you wouldn't need to have it in front of you if you knew it, because it's not actually very long.
Okay.
Are you aware of the obligation? If not, I can tell you, but are you aware of the obligation that is placed upon the UK?
Well, it's designed to limit the cost of collection because it was exceeding the revenue collected from before.
Right, well, the directive itself was introduced by the EU, it was not introduced by the UK. It wasn't introduced by the UK to help the flour industry. You're confusing that with the prepaid VAT scheme. That was introduced so that companies in the Channel Islands could prepay VAT and stop flours getting delayed in the post. Low-value consignment relief came in 1983 across the EU and is a discretionary relief for member states to relieve collection costs on small amounts of VAT where the cost of collection is greater than the amount of VAT.
Yeah.
And obviously this was at a time when there weren't really many computers in use. Since then things have changed hugely. Everything is now computerised apart from mail that goes over the counter. But that was the reason it came in. It wasn't brought in at all to help the Channel Islands. It was brought in right across the EU, and it was specifically designed to help member states relieve unnecessary collection costs. But there's one big provision in this, and you should be fully aware of it, is that the UK is obligated to stop the relief from being used for avoidance, evasion and abuse. And that is obligated to them under Article 1 of the directive, and also under the Principal VAT Directive, which is the directive that covers the entire VAT system. Anybody that understood this would realise that the moment that you start using this for tax avoidance or abuse, the UK is under a legal obligation under European law to take action to prevent it. And I find it odd that as the person that is supposed to be dealing with this, you weren't aware of that, because I'd like you to explain why you're encouraging companies like HMV to come to Guernsey, because clearly they went there.
Mr. Allen, let's give Deputy McNulty Bauer an opportunity to address those points then.
Yeah, I think your comment about encouraging is totally incorrect. The de minimis regime has been in place in Guernsey, in the Channel Islands, as you say, since 1983. I know prior to being involved in politics myself, I was involved in the fulfilment industry, and it has always been a potential threat that the UK may choose to change that regime. It's gone on for many years. The Labour government knew of the issues. They decided not to do anything about it. It's only now that the UK government, with the coalition, with recognising the deficits and the fiscal situation in the United Kingdom, they have chosen to make that move.
I think you're wrong there, because we took a complaint to the European Commission, and it's not difficult to understand. If the UK is under a legal obligation to prevent it being used for avoidance and abuse, can you explain why anybody would want to move their business to Guernsey? I mean, there are companies that have said that they've had to go to Guernsey because the market distortion became so great that if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to compete. Mm-hmm. So the reason they're going there is to avoid VAT. And the thing is that if they are going there to avoid VAT, that's in breach of the directive covering this relief.
Well, they're not here to answer themselves, but I think if you were to question them, they would say that they wanted to operate on a level playing field.
Right, but I mean, you haven't really answered my question. If the directive obligates the UK to prevent avoidance, are you saying that people are not going to Guernsey to avoid VAT? Because if they are, then the UK is in breach of the directive, and you should have known that this would have happened at some point.
As far as my understanding is, and I'm sure if you were to ask these companies, they would say what they wanted was a level playing field.
We have heard this objection raised locally as well, have we not? Earlier on this week, when the announcement was made, we heard from Rodney Breward of the Guernsey Bulk Mailers Association, who was also saying that really Guernsey had allowed this convenience to turn into an abuse or an evasion, effectively, by allowing in big companies. He did name specifically HMV.
No one has broken any laws about being here. Guernsey does not have a regime where it could turn businesses away. Now, what we have done is used through the Environment Department and our planning regime. If a business has come in and needs to find appropriate accommodation, and it requires a change of use, there has been an opportunity there. And likewise, with our housing licence regime, then there's been the ability to switch on and switch off.
So
but unlike
some of the levers that are available are within the hands of those two departments. Happily, of course, we have the Environment Minister with us, Peter Stewart.
Unlike Jersey, we have no control of regulation undertakings. And
you've not sought the law that they've introduced?
No.
No, so you've chosen not to have that control?
Well, the government, the Guernsey government, has chosen not to implement that legislation in the past.
Yeah, and you've not requested it from the Commerce and Employment Department. Okay, Deputy Stewart.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of points on what Richard's saying. Good morning, Richard. You suggested that companies are fleeing from the UK and coming here for the purposes of exploiting a loophole that you see.
Well, I'll go further than that. I'd say that I think...
Well, sorry, I'm speaking at the moment. You've had your say.
Mr. Allen, could we just allow Deputy Stewart to...
You want to hear what I've got to say, Mr. Allen? Give me the chance, please.
Okay.
I believe that a lot of companies come to Guernsey for many reasons, not just, in your view, exploiting a loophole. We have in Guernsey a tremendous infrastructure that's been set up as a result of the success of our finance industry, and that comprises a huge network of lawyers, insurance companies. It is a good place to do business. And that is the reason that a lot of people come here, apart from the fact that Guernsey is a very pleasant place to live. And to say that people are just coming from the UK to set up companies here to exploit the loophole is frankly incorrect.
Well, why are they all threatening to leave then?
They're not all threatening to leave. There are a few companies...
All over the news, so they're all wanting to go to Switzerland because they can't avoid VAT anymore.
Richard, we have far, far more than just fulfilment companies in Guernsey.
The Jersey government commissioned a report in 2005 from a company...
we're in Guernsey, not Jersey.
Yeah, but it came to the conclusion that the only reason that there was a fulfilment industry in Jersey was because of the exploitation of LVCR.
You used the word correctly, in Jersey.
So there's a difference between Jersey and Guernsey on that front then?
I believe there is, but I'm not familiar with what happens in Jersey.
Well, maybe you could answer the other question. Why are there so many people in the Guernsey government that seem to have an interest in the fulfilment industry? I find the conflict of interest staggering.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware that there's a huge interest in fulfilment in Guernsey in the government.
Well, I mean, Deputy Bauer had a background in the LVCR industry.
That's not a conflict of interest if that was prior to my involvement in politics. We do have one other member
Mr. Sillers?
We do have one other member.
Of fulfilment.
We do have
Mr.
one
Allen, allow Deputy McNulty to speak, please.
We do have one other member that I'm aware of in the States of Guernsey who does have involvement in fulfilment, and it's because of his conflict he has not been involved in any discussions that we have around our table.
Yes, we spoke to Deputy Sillers a couple of days ago, and he was keen to point out the extent to which he has had to leave various meetings and not be involved in the discussions. And also, Mr. Allen, I ought to point out that Deputy Malati Bauer has in the past been very upfront about her previous involvement in the fulfilment industry. So I feel that it would appear to be a bit of a red herring. But thank you for all of the points that you have raised thus far. We are, of course, going to return to this issue of low-value consignment relief. But I want to cross now to another caller this morning, Sarah, who has also rung 200 373, as you're free to do. Gareth is here to take your calls. And Sarah, who's on the line now. Good morning to you, Phil.
Good morning. Morning, everybody.
Morning, Phil.
What did you want to ask our deputies this morning?
Well, my question actually relates to the 2012 elections, but if I could just make a point on your first caller, the Richard Allen, I believe it was, who's one of the campaigners to do away with the LVCR. I think that Deputy Sirrett's response that that companies have come here for any other reason than to exploit that loophole was ludicrous, to be perfectly honest. Let's face it, the cost of doing business in Guernsey in terms of operational costs, i.e. rent, staffing, etc., are far higher than other jurisdictions. The only way for them to gain advantage is to exploit that VAT loophole, and to suggest otherwise is
Sorry, I wasn't referring to fulfilment companies. I was referring to companies per se. Richard Allen was saying...
I don't know why you were referring to companies per se.
Well, that's what Richard Allen referred to. He said companies are pouring into Guernsey.
No. Richard Allen quite clearly was referring to the fulfilment industry, and for you to try and turn that around to say companies in general is ludicrous, to be perfectly honest. Anyway...
Well, can I just say, we haven't had businesses flooding into Guernsey. We've had very few businesses, and
really?
We have a lot of businesses who are local and homegrown and have built up their organisations totally here locally. We've had very few companies coming in.
Perhaps you could advise me, and Deputy McNulty Bauer, how many of the larger fulfilment industries are locally owned? None?
No, quite a few of them are.
Really? Which ones?
Well, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to mention names, but I mean, one of them is Healthspan.
Sorry?
Healthspan.
Healthspan. I think didn't they say they about 20 warehouse staff or something, 30 warehouse staff?
Are you talking about ownership of the company? Or are you talking about...
You asked about the ownership of these companies.
Yeah, no, absolutely, but I'm talking about the larger ones, i.e. the HMVs, the Moonpigs, that type of...
Right, no, HMV's not locally owned.
Moonpig.
Moonpig, I think, was, but I think they were sold a few months ago.
Thompson Morgan, the plant people...
Phil, can I just interrupt there? Is it, in your view, of paramount importance that the companies be owned by, be locally owned? Because obviously there is the other side of things, which is, even if they're not locally owned, they could be employing local people and not necessarily exploiting the low-value consignment relief.
Well, I think that one of the points that Mr. Allen was making was that people have come here as opposed to being local companies that are exploiting that loophole, for want of a better phrase, maybe. It's not local companies that have been doing it. It's people that have come in specifically for that reason. It's not local businesses that have taken advantage.
Deputy McNulty, this is a fundamental point, isn't it? Because if the fulfilment industry in Guernsey is characterised by companies that have come here because it is in their financial interests to send items to the UK VAT-free up to a certain amount, then is that not evidence, as Mr. Allen said earlier and Rodney Broad said to us earlier this week, that we have allowed this to be abused?
Abuse is a very strong word. This is, to date, has been, and still is, a perfectly legitimate tax regime. Now, if you go back to the time when HMV came over here, which is about 2005, I think they will have said, no, we're not here to exploit your tax regime. We're here because we want a level playing field. And had they not done that, I think we could have seen some changes in the LVCR regime even sooner, because they could have actually got into bed with the RAVAS scheme.
So what do you mean by a level playing field? What were they talking about when they said that?
Because of a very large homegrown company in Jersey that was becoming extremely competitive in providing CDs and DVDs.
And the reason they were becoming particularly competitive is because they didn't have to pay the taxes that their UK equivalents had to. Yeah. So why did you not say no to those companies coming in?
Because I think I've already said that we can't say no. We have certainly not encouraged, not promoted LVCR over the last few years, because we've always known that there could be a risk to it, but we have not had a mechanism in our laws that says you cannot operate here.
But when you
and I've
spoke
explained to you that
Sure.
the tools in the toolbox that we have relate to planning and relate to housing licences.
Sure, and yet you told my colleague Jim Cathcart earlier this week that you had said no to a company that had wanted to come here.
Yes, because they purely wanted to be a brass plate company. So we
But
said,
how did
no.
you say no?
Because they came and said, we'd quite like to set up a business over here. We are looking for a site the size of the old Tectonics building. We want to employ 200 staff. So we just say, well, we don't have property of that size. We don't have anything that has the right planning requirements on it, and quite frankly, to introduce that sort of size of a company over here, we just don't have the staff available to fit it.
So it was an economic consideration, the unavailability of a suitable building, that stopped that company coming here?
Plus the fact that at the time the Labour government were concerned about the volume of DVDs and CDs that were coming out of the Channel Islands.
But sorry, I'm being picky, I know, but I'm just trying to get to the mechanism by which you said no. It was that one economic consideration. They couldn't find the sites, that's why they didn't come.
No, a particular company came to me and we said it's not appropriate that you come to Guernsey at this time because of the concerns raised by the UK government.
So you could have said that to HMV, but you chose not to.
Well, it wasn't so much of an issue at that time.
Could I
And
just-
HMV were not just coming over to be. I should have emphasised as well that they were just talking about being brass plated. So they're putting something on their door, and then they were just importing and exporting straight away.
Excuse me.
What HMV were proposing to
Hang on,
do
Phil.
was to have a much greater footprint. They were proposing to put all of their online operations over here. They were setting up a retail shop over here. They were intending to use a lot of local labour. They made a commitment to supporting lots of initiatives in our local community, and, for example, supported the HMV Castle Nights for several years. So it's not, from our perspective, it's not. We don't have the tools to say yes or no. We can smile or frown with enthusiasm. Certainly at the time, the Commerce and Employment Minister was very nervous and not supportive of HMV coming over here, but we did not have the tools to say no. Anybody can come over here, providing they're not breaking laws, can set up a business.
Okay, Phil, you wanted to come back on that?
Sorry, I'm just getting... I know it's Sunday morning, I'm slightly hungover, but I'm getting very confused. Deputy McNulty Bower was just saying that this was a brass plate company. A brass plate company is one that basically has a Guernsey registered office for whatever reason, not one that is proposing to employ 200 staff. It's either brass plate or it's an operational company, and a company that employs 200 staff or proposes to certainly isn't a brass plate company. I find your comments very strange, I have to say.
Did you have a particular question? I understood you mentioned when you came on initially that you wanted to talk about the elections.
Exactly, and my question to the two deputies would be, A, are they intending to stand in the 2012 elections, and if so, do they consider that they have a good chance of being elected?
Right, okay. Deputy Peter Sirriter, this is a question I asked you the other day, I think.
Well, it's a question that I've been looking at for some time. When I came into the States in 2008, I had made a decision that this would be my last term.